How are we doing, guys? It's Luke here of SimBoxx. Welcome along to episode 4 of the SimBoxx Presents Let's Talk Boxing. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jamie. Jamie, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, mate. I'm doing great. Looking forward to another episode. Lots to talk about. And yeah, things are good at the minute, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. We're getting straight back into it now. 4 episodes, and the views are steadily climbing on YouTube. So a big thank you to our followers, our viewers for the continued support. And we'll get straight into it. There's a lot of boxing to look back on from the weekend, some shock results, some great fights, and plenty to look forward to. And I think we'll look forward before we look back. And the return of the Bronze Bomber, Deontay Wilder. He is coming off the back of one win in five. He was beat by Joseph Parker. He was knocked out emphatically by Zhilei Zhang. And this weekend he takes on Tyrell Herndon in somewhat of a low-key comeback. It's not the glitz and the glamour of the Las Vegas or Saudi Arabia
Yeah.
that he's used to. But is there still a place for the Bronze Bomber in the heavyweight division in 2025, Jamie?
Do you know what? It's a weird one. It's because we spoke about Wilder and Dave Allen possibly fighting, and obviously saying that there's still levels to it, and you'd think Wilder's still at that level. But then I see like his demeanor is not that of a fighter anymore. Do you know, in the way that he carries himself and he conducts himself, like he doesn't seem like he's that killer bronze bomber anymore. And um, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, you know, that obviously he's shot though, but I don't know if I don't know if he's got it in him for them big hard fights. Um, this is obviously it depends on this fight, because obviously you could go out there and knock him out in the first round and get that confidence back and go, yeah, let's have another run at it. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I'll tell you what would be. I'll understand better if there's going to be a place for him is on his performance this weekend.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions out there, and I think the kind of worry, if you like, is taking on someone like Tyrell Herndon, who's an unheralded opponent, with all due respect, in comparison to the level that Wilder's previously been campaigning at. Um, could it paper over the cracks? A 39-year-old Deontay Wilder going in against Herndon. He's got a record of 24 wins, 5 losses, but he's not really beat anybody of notes. This is a massive step up in class for him. You'd say that this show was obviously all made around Deontay Wilder. That if he goes in there and looks like the Bronze Bomber of old, and he detonates that right hand the way he does, better than anybody else, and he lays Herndon out in one round, kind of how he did against Dominic Brazil, and you're like, okay, Bronze Bomber's back, and then do we kind of push him into a big fight with an anti-Joshua, because that's a name that's been linked with him and will always be linked with him.
Yeah, yeah,
Then we kind of like, are we setting him up for a huge downfall again? Because he has been, for the want of a better phrase, exposed. That we always knew that he was a one-trick pony when his one trick was that good. Like, I'm not
yeah,
downplaying his power, but the likes of Tyson Fury, when he beat him twice, you're kind of like, okay, he's Tyson Fury, just his kryptonite. But then he was quite tepid against Joseph Parker, and he was completely outgunned by Zhilei Zhang. And
yeah,
you know, is it papering over the cracks? Should he? He's got plenty of money though. Those Tyson Fury fights were money spinning fights, and the fights with Joe Parker and Dilly Zhang have been part of this big Riyadh explosion. So he's not going to be short of a few quid. So you're kind of sitting back thinking, if he's not the killer bronze bomber that you mentioned, he's not skint. What is the inspiration? Is he generally thinking that he's getting back into world title contention? Because if he isn't that killer, if it's not inside him, he's going to know better than anybody. What is
yeah. But I don't.
what's the motivation here?
This is what I'm saying. I think that's why this weekend will be a big telling him, because he was outboxed by Parker and he was outgunned by Zhang. But also in both them fights, he fought on the back foot, and I wouldn't say timid, but he didn't really let his hands go much in both
Apprehensive.
fights.
Apprehensive, I
He's
think.
very apprehensive, which isn't the Deontay Wilder that you're used to seeing, and especially against Zhang, he was even more apprehensive. So with this Tyrell that he's fighting, obviously this is a massive step up for him. If he looks apprehensive in there against him, I would then, even if he goes out and he knocks him out, because in reality he should go in and knock him out. He might go in the first round and bam, first shot, it's over. But if he doesn't and it's apprehensive and it goes 2 rounds, 3 rounds, and then he knocks him out in the fourth. But if he's apprehensive at any point in that fight, that's when I would probably, even if you win, say maybe there isn't a place for you at the top of the table anymore. And what is serious to the goal? Because I don't think you'll win a world title if he's apprehensive against Tyrell.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of questions to be answered. I think for me, with Deontay Wilder, he is, still so exciting. Even in the loss with Joe Parker and the loss to Zhilei Zhang, that you thought, at some point that right hand's going to go. It's still
Yeah,
soft, isn't it? It's still fireworks, the potential for fireworks. And you're just thinking, right, he's going to go in a second. He's going to go in a second. Look at the second win. The first win over Luis Ortiz was great, but that second win, he'd lost 7.5 rounds and knocked him out with about 10 seconds to go in round seven. I always remember it was round seven because I had a bet on round seven as well in the second Luis Ortiz fight. But it was one punch, wasn't it? And that landed on Luis Ortiz's forehead. And that kind of excitement, there's very few fighters. Gervonta Davis, off the top of my head, is another one way. And Naoya Inoue is another. There's very few
yeah, that one
of those
shot.
fighters, where people like Beterbiev, other big punches, they're more of a concussive, breakdown of an opponent. These guys that switch your lights off in an instant, the
Yeah,
proper box office. And Deontay Wilder is the last of a dying breed in heavyweight, especially when you look at some of the fighters in there. I know Daniel Dubois is a big puncher himself, but there's just something about Deontay Wilder for me. And I think
yeah,
when
it's always
I think when he does hang up his
that right.
gloves,
Sorry.
he's going to be missed. But I don't know if Saturday's going to be the time when he hangs up his gloves. Like I say, I'm just perplexed. Like our viewers can comment in the comment section and let us know. Like if he's got all the money in the world and if he's not really got that desire there to win a world title, then is he just doing it for himself? Is he just looking to get answers for himself that he's doing this fight for him? Who knows?
A lot of questions. A lot of questions.
On the undercard of that as well, just before we move on, Jeffrey Page is making his comeback. First fight since 2017. I got an interview with him. So for all our viewers, make sure you go through the channel here, have a look at the interview with Jeffrey Page. He was actually the first man to drop Arthur Beterbiev, and he went on to lose that fight, of course, like everybody does to Beterbiev, unless you call Bivol. Um, Really engrossing chat. So yeah, I implore our viewers, our listeners, to go and check that interview out with Jeffrey Page. He makes his comeback on Saturday. Another big show in America, Jamie, and we debated this over text. Do we address it? Do we not? But because of the undercard and because he is actually a boxer, we are going to address it. And this is
Yeah.
the enigma, Jake Paul, 11-1. But you would think that he's 100-0 with the attitude that he has. He's going in against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who in his own right is a bit of an enigma. People don't really know what to make of him. You ask 100 people about Chavez Jr. and you get 100 different answers. Jake Paul, Jamie, is he or isn't he a real boxer?
Do you know what?
I've been waiting to
I
put.
have to look. I'm going to look away when I say it. Yeah, but he is. He is. He is because like obviously at first it was all like you're not. I have to take my hat off to him because is it 6 years now he's been doing it?
Yeah,
Or,
something like that. Yeah,
but coming up to 6, 7 years, and he's dedicated all his time and energy into it. And obviously he's not got that amateur background and he's not done it from day one. But it's 6 or 7 years constantly training at one thing, and he does spar other professionals, and he has a good team behind him. He's got the money to have the best team behind him and the best training methods and whatnot. And at this point, he is a boxer. And yeah, you have to say that. And obviously, he's not fought a boxer of his caliber apart from Tommy Fury. We all know what happened with that. But he is a boxer, and they're very, very clever there playing the game.
yeah. I think that's the best way to put it. There is that you're playing the game because the couple of things that I was going to mention is I love everything about Jake Paul when it comes to boxing. Apart from his choice of opponents, I think he carries himself like your modern day boxer with the jewelry and the swagger and the brashness and the trash talking. But similar to Dana White, they come out with these cliches about boxing is dead, there's no excitement, but they don't really pinpoint what they're talking about. They say, oh, fighters are on the back foot. They don't go looking for the knockout. Well, give us an example because we could show you another 10 examples where, Jonathan Nakatani, Naoya Inoue, we've already mentioned, Nick Ball, Gervonta Tank Davis, these fighters that go for the knockout and go for the kill, and Beterbiev and Bivol, we can show you exciting fights. So they come over with these cliches about boxing's dead. I'm, reviving the sport. I'm the face of the sport, and that's total bollocks. The other thing is he totally neglects to mention when he's on about changing the game and becoming a world champion that he lost to Tommy Fury, and Tommy Fury, all due respect, isn't going to win a British title.
No.
and he beat Jake Paul, and it's just wiped from people's memories almost. It's almost like a level of delusion there with Jake Paul that doesn't exist, that didn't happen, and he continues to move with this character, this persona of I'm unbeatable, I'm going to beat Canelo. And then when you look at the list of opponents that he puts out, and he's anywhere from Gervonta Davis up to Anthony Joshua, and I think at this point we are getting reeled in by the world's best boxing troll. But everything other than that, the improvements that you see him make, the level of ability that he has got, because there is some ability there, the marketability, and also which is separate to him being a boxer, the things that he's doing for female boxing, you can't doubt that.
Yeah,
He's
you can't write that
Amanda
off.
Serrano
Yeah,
on such a platform. You look at that all-female card that he's putting on for Taylor Serrano 3, Ellie Scotney, Chantel Cameron, Savannah Marshall all flying the flag for the UK on a terrific bill. But yeah, I just think there's so much that I like and there's so much that I dislike that I still can't give a true answer on what I think of him. I just think the delusion and all that kind of thing. I'll beat Canelo and this, that, and the other. I'll beat Joshua. That's all clickbait. We get that.
yeah, yeah,
But if he starts, if he moves from Tommy Fury to another kind of British title level opponent, subpar British title level opponent, because he did take on a couple of unknown American fighters that were pro boxers with, was he 10-1 or 11-1,
yeah,
something like that.
yeah. But
If he went along them lines, you'd say, you know what, he's building something here, but he can't do that because his name dictates that he's going to get opportunities against whoever he picks. The Mike Tyson thing was a whole farce.
yeah, ridiculous.
Julio Cesar Chavez, I think, is going to be the most respectable name on his record. He's beat Nate Diaz and Mike Perry.
But it's wolf tickets though. It's wolf tickets, and
Yeah.
obviously ex-world champion, won numerous amount of fights. But was Chavez Jr. a world-class elite level boxer when he was a world champion? No, he wasn't.
I'm not
He
gassing
wasn't.
Chavez up. I'm just saying he's still the best or the
No, but
most valid opponent.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying that this is where they're selling the wolf tickets in the sense of like, right, you keep saying you want me to fight a I'm fighting a world champion, but you're not fighting the world champion that when he was a world champion, you're not fighting that version of him, and that version of him wasn't actually elite level. He was very lucky in his career of who his father was, and until he went and when he actually had to fight somebody decent, and he went in with Canelo, he didn't want to be in there from round one. And the only reason he didn't quit was because obviously it was Cinco de Mayo, it was Mexico versus Mexico, and obviously his dad was there and whatnot. But you could tell in that fight he didn't want to be there. And the problem with Chavez Jr. is, which obviously it's clever because again he's a world champion, he's fought Pete, all these different big names, but he's been off the rails for years. He's been off the rails for years. I'm not don't want to disrespect the guy, but he's had his very open problems with substances and whatnot, and he's not the same man he was mentally and in his mind frame, because he lost to Anderson Silva in a boxing match, and he didn't look like he wanted to be there. It was just taking a payday, and that's what I worry about in this fight. Is if he turns up and he actually boxes, he should easily beat Jake Paul, right? But if he turns up and he's getting paid, he's not asked, and he lets Jake Paul put it on him, and he loses, it's just going to make the whole charade and the game of Jake Paul even bigger, And whereas he shouldn't be fighting Chavez Jr., he should be fighting somebody like you said, a British level fighter, British title level contender on our shows, or a decent American opponent that's on the up, that's not fighting tomato cans. No disrespect to the tomato cans, you know what I mean? But it's, I don't know. It's just clever. It's very clever what they're doing and the way that they're
Absolutely.
doing it.
That goes back to the marketability thing that I said about him. He is a genius. He's an absolute genius with what he's doing. He's got us talking about it. He's got everybody talking about it. And I think the worry for me is with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is, when we look at these fights and before the Nate Diaz fight, I thought, Nate Diaz can't be bought. He's going to stick it on Jake Paul here. And then he loses. You think Anderson Silva can't be bought. And then these people talking about, did he actually get dropped? And did that punch make contact? Mike Perry, another one. And after the fact, you kind of go, yeah, well, these guys are making more money than they've ever made before. Julio Chavez Jr. for breaking fourth wall here, and we're saying, it's Jake Paul, brown envelopes and all that, and paying these opponents off to make him look good. You wouldn't back Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. to be completely above board, and he's going in there with the warrior mentality, with the Mexican spirit. He's the son of the legend, and you won't put your house on him absolutely, being desperate to win against Jake Paul. Like you imagine somebody in the cruiserweight division, that's roughly around where Jake campaigns. Imagine somebody like a Jaya Pataya, that killer mentality. Or even, respectfully down the levels in the UK, Chris Billam-Smith, former world champion, Jack Massa, European champion. You know what these guys are do to Jake Paul, and you trust these
One
guys.
round.
You trust
One
these
round.
guys to go in there and do the job that they're getting paid to do. Some of these opponents with Jake Paul, there's question marks around it. And I think Chavez Jr. is another one where you'd have a question mark around him, like you say. You don't know where his head's at respectfully heading into the fight. It's going to be a huge payday. And at this stage of his career, respectfully, there's not going to be too many big paydays, nothing like what he's going to get on Saturday night anyway. So, yeah, I think it leaves a lot to be desired. One thing that I'm going to mention here, because we're flying through the fights, we're not dropping our predictions as we usually do because myself and Jamie are going to be returning with the 1 minute prediction clips to the YouTube channel on SimBoxx. So look out for Deontay Wilder and Jake Paul prediction clips coming up. Jamie, will move on to the other fight on this weekend main card. You got Mbele and Selecki as well in the super middleweight contest. It should be a great fight on Friday night. But we're going to look at the light heavyweight division here in the UK. It's an all British European light heavyweight title fight. And finally, fingers crossed, we're here 4 or 5 days out from the fight, but we're hoping to get Shakan Pitters and Brad Rea finally in the ring with this European title on the line. I think it's got the makings of a classic, and especially with the circus that's surrounded getting this fight on. There's been fights falling through, changes of locations, no real explanations, and it's landed in Hull of all places. You got Brad from Manchester, you got Shakan Pitters, who isn't from Hull, and they're clashing in the most random of locations, but finally it's on, and I'm really looking forward to this one, Jamie.
Yeah, it should be a spicy affair, and obviously it has been a proper weird roller coaster to get to this point. But we are finally here, and I'm expecting it to be a banger. I think there's a lot of I think there is a bit of spite there. I don't think it's a case of trying to sell the fight. I think there
There's
is
a lot of finger
genuinely.
pointing, and there's a lot of finger pointing about, with you chuck Dos Santos back in there. So for anyone that's not aware, the fight was originally Dos Santos against Pitters. Pitters pulls out on fight week. Brad Rea takes a fight, and then Dos Santos pulls out. And yeah, I think was it on fight day when Dos Santos pulled out the Brad Rea fight. So yeah, so I think that there's a lot of finger pointing, as you said. There's the genuine needle now building up from no, I wasn't wrong, you was wrong, and he was wrong, and I think that, yeah, the uncertainty about when the fight was actually going to take place was all built up to make this a cracking little event.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's why it's going to be spicy, and I think we could have more of a brawl in there as opposed to um, a high level technical boxing match. So I think the casuals should definitely tune in because I think that's going to be a proper dust up. I think they're going to sit in the pocket and go toe to toe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, with Brad Rea, not that I favour one guy over the other, but with Brad Rea, I've interviewed him a couple of times, and with him being from around these areas, we've kind of got to know him a little bit more than I would Shaq and Pitters. But with Brad, he was discarded almost from the elite level scene, if you like, the big TV shows with Sky after he lost to Tyler Denny in what was a cracking fight. But in the build up to that fight, when he was undefeated, he was campaigning at middleweight as well. So he's come up through the divisions. He was knocking people out. He was fan friendly. He was selling tickets, and then he wasn't given the opportunity to bounce back from that defeat to Tyler Denny. He went back to the small hall show, and he was picking up wins on the small hall scene. I think he had 7 or 8 fights, um, picking up wins and building up this record. And he was going to have a fight on the Bivol Beterbiev undercard, the rematch. He was going to fight Lennox Lewis's protege. That fell through. Then this European title opportunity come around. This fell through. So for Brad, I'm just almost relieved, if you like. He's a good guy, and really look forward to him getting the opportunity. And I wish Shaq and Pitters all the best. I'm not saying I favour one guy over the other, as I've already said. But for Brad, I think it would be a really good Cinderella story that he's been discarded and he's come back now with GBM, and that he can really make a statement, and a career best win against Shakan Pitters. And if he lifts that European title, it'll be some, middle finger stuck up to the guys that disregarded him and didn't give him that opportunity to rebuild.
Yeah, of course, and that's sometimes the sad part of the sad side of boxing, as you know, sometimes a loss can completely derail your career and can easily have you sort of dropped in a way. And I think that's where a problem comes in with fighters wanting to keep an all and not seeing some of the fights that we should see. That fear of, you know, if I do lose, you know, it might be a big mountain to climb again, to get back up there at the top. So, but both have got losses, and so I think there's nothing to lose on both sides. Like you said, yeah, you know, Brady's a local lad from Manchester. Again, not trying to favour anyone, but you know, as a fellow man, you know, it'd be nice to see him do that, and you know, from being done to, like you said, building his way back up, having to go back to fucking the small hall shows. It would be nice to see him get his arm raised and go on to obviously the doors that will open from that.
Absolutely. You know, one name that I want to quickly mention that was due to take, well, due to fight on the GBM card this weekend was Hughie Fiore, cousin of Tyson Fury. Doesn't have the profile of his, you know, cousin, former multi-time world champion. Hughie Fiore pulled out with about 10 days, I think it was 5 days ago. So you're looking at around 10 days before fight night with a hand injury. It's a really perplexing story with Hughie Fiore. You look back at the start of his career and he's fought Joseph Parker, Alexander Povetkin, uh, Kubrat Pulev.
Who,
Oh, and even though he lost to these guys, he was, what was he, 19, 20, 21? He was fighting for WBO world titles and whatnot. And then he had health issues. We all know that. And, you know, luckily he got past that and was told, you know, this is the new improved Hughie Fiore. He's finding his man strength. He's coming back into his own. He's had some comeback wins, not really looked spectacular. And he's not really kind of making any waves, is he? I think you look at the heavyweight division, and we're talking last week or a couple of weeks back on one of our episodes about Moser Talma and the kind of level that he would have been operating at and chucking names together in such a competitive division, both domestically and internationally. David Adeleye and Hergovich or Jamie TKV looking for an opponent or Dave Allen looking for an opponent. Hughie Fury's just for one reason or another, just not in that mix. Is it? What would you make of the story of Hughie Fury so far, Jamie? Just on a bit of
don't know.
a diverse.
Yeah, but I don't know what it is with Hugh Fury. Like you said, he had well-known health issues, but I genuinely, I don't know. I think one, he's not very marketable, and two, he's never seems to be around. You know, he's not signed to any big promoters. He's not on the TVs anymore. When he does get a fight announced and he starts training, he pulls out for one reason or another. He gets injured, which has resulted in him going to the more the smaller shows to a degree. Um, but I genuinely don't understand because he was flying at one point, even though, like you said, he had lost to these fighters. He was flying. He was always in the mix to possibly get a world title shot. I thought he was unlucky against Parker. It wasn't shades of Ali. It wasn't shades of Ali. But but
Sharp mechanism.
big up Mickey. But I actually thought he did. I thought he did win it. Um, but I understood people's argument for the fact that, oh well, Parker came to fight, but boxing's a game of hitting and not getting hit, and I felt that fight, even though there wasn't much action, most of the hitting and not getting hit was coming from Hewitt. And I thought, even though he lost that, he was going to go on to do some good things because he's a very good technical boxer. But I've always said about him, and it's not just me because I've heard his dad say it loads of times in the corner as well. Let your right hand go. Because his jab, you watch him and just he pops that jab off, pops it off, and it's a really good jab, but he rarely follows back. I don't know if that's a situation of that's putting himself in danger. He don't want to be in that danger area. I don't know. I don't know what it is because even his dad said at times in the corner, he's going, "You've got to let your right hand go. Let your right hand. It's there. It's there. Your jab's hitting him. If your jab's hitting him, the right hand's going to hit him." And I don't know. He stalled and then sort of he dropped off to the point he's never in the conversation for anything.
No, he's not.
And this was the opportunity to get back in the conversation, and it's not.
But one thing I will finish on, you know, I wish him the best, you know, and if he is injured, then, you know, I wish him the best with the recovery process. And with Peter Fiore, as you mentioned there in the corner, one of the best minds in British boxing. So we look forward to seeing the return of Hughie Fiore and hopefully he can fulfill somewhat of that potential. Let's look back on the Matchroom card on DAZN this past weekend, Jamie. I caught the second half of the Galal Yafai fight. I was all over the place with timings and whatnot, but very quickly picked up the gist live. I've watched it back since, so it's quite easy to get the gist of Yafai's shortcomings against Rodriguez, who was punch perfect. Something not a lot's been made of his pressure and his front foot come forward style, but his accuracy. He's thrown so many punches, but he was landing so many punches. And shout out to Galal Yafai. He took a lot of shots there. There's a big argument about whether the towel should have come in at some point. For me, it should have, because those kind of fights at 32 years of age, Galal Yafai, we look at him as a prospect because he's 9-0, but at 32 years of age,
Yeah.
he's not got time on his side. And those shots take years off your career. And when you've not got many years left, time is valuable. But shout out to Rodriguez. He puts himself in line now for that world title shot. But what did you make of the fight, Jamie?
I thought Rodriguez was exceptional. Like, to the point that it was annoying me because I wanted Galal to win, but he was just beating him from pillar to post. And like he had him hurt in the first round, he had him hurt continuously throughout the fight, dropped him in the 12th. He had a mad engine. He could keep it up, but he did to Galal Yafai what Galal Yafai does to his opponents. The way that he beat Sonny Edwards, he mauled Sonny Edwards the way that Rodriguez mauled him, and I was for one was not expecting it. And yeah, you've got to shout out Rodriguez, some performance. He's had his setbacks in his own career. Um, and this has put him right back in the mix. He's going to get a world title opportunity. And fair play to him because he won every round, really. He didn't Galal from the first round onwards, he just could not handle him at all. Didn't have any answers. And like you said, the towel probably should have come in. The towel probably should have come in when he went down in the 12th round, to be fair. They shouldn't have let him carry on because they were some big heavy shots that he took in that round as well. And it's back to the drawing board for your fight now, and where he goes from here, I don't know. Um, like I said, he's 32 years of age. He's not got long. He's going to have to jump straight back in there with another top contender. That's maybe in the top 3, 4 across the division.
I think, there was an argument made about was he chucked in at the deep end too soon. But I think when you're in these lighter weight divisions, with all due respect, but we do know that the smaller guys don't get the attention of your welterweights, your middleweights, and your heavyweights, and in between. You look at someone like Galal Yafai. He was in the amateur setup for so long, Olympic gold medalist. He was at another Olympic Games. It could be a question mark of did he stay in the amateur code for too long? And you are going to be rushed, but you're also going to be rushed when you're in that lower weight division. That at 9-0, he'd beat the contenders, he'd beat the guys that were there or thereabouts. He beat Sonny Edwards, a former world champion, in the only real domestic grudge match that was going to be made. So it's difficult to say was he rushed? And as you say there, that he once he takes the defeat, there's not really going to be a rebuilding process. I know he's a number of years younger than Joe Joyce, but it reminds me of Joe Joyce. When he took that loss to Zhilei Zhang, and
Yeah.
Anthony Joshua, when he took his losses and he's rebuilt a couple of times and he's took the fights with Jermaine Franklin and Otto Wallen and whatnot and got himself back into contention and then went on and lost again. Joe Joyce didn't have the opportunity to do that. He lost his Zhang and he went into another big fight and another big fight and he was taking these losses. With Galal Yafai, he has that problem, but he also has the problem that he's not really in a marketable division where you think, okay, let's rebuild. But so where do you go from headlining in Birmingham to what do you tuck him away on an undercard somewhere, give him an 8 rounder, give him a 10 rounder, and then look to go again? I don't really know, and I think that's the worrying thing for Galal Yafai because he is an exciting talent, but the worry is did he stay in the amateur code for just too long? Because he's shown a lot of heart, a lot of grit, a lot of determination. There's a lot of plus points, but to go from the highs of Sonny Edwards, and people will say what they like about Sonny Edwards, but I think he was ranked number one with the Ring magazine at the time. Galal beat him, world champion in his own right, and Galal smashed him. Say what you want. Was Sonny Edwards' head not in the game? Did it overestimate how good we thought Galal Yafai was? But to go from that high to this low, all due respect to Rodriguez, closing on 50 pro fights, if we'd done a preview of this and we'd done a podcast last week, we would have been sat here saying Galal Yafai, unanimous decision
Yeah, yeah.
to a world title fight. So to go from that high to this low, with all due respect to Rodriguez, it raises a lot of question marks. And worryingly, you kind of think, well, what's next? As you say there, do you
Yeah.
go straight back in with a killer? It's
I think that's probably his only option, really. No, he's got to just go back in there with a top contender. And it's the question, so was he rushed? There's probably an argument for it being only 9 fights deep, but it just beat Sonny Edwards, who'd only lost was to Bam Rodriguez. So, you know, he, yeah, you can't really go over because he went and beat the number one at the time. Well, the former number one, probably number two. You probably said he was number two because it was only Bam that had beat him.
Yeah.
And he, like you said, he absolutely demolished him, battered him, absolutely battered him, overwhelmed him. Whether Sonny was in the right mind frame or not, he battered him. And that's why I think he's got to jump straight back in with somebody because you can't wait around.
Yeah, of course. And when somebody takes that kind of loss and you think, oh, can we go up a weight division, especially when you're getting into your 30s, you look at the divisions up and around him, just a couple of names off the top of my head. Bam Rodriguez, uh, we've seen what he done to Sonny Edwards, one of the real pound for pound superstars, and he beat Estrada, and you look up another division and it's Junto Nakatani, and you think there's not really too many avenues here where you can think, I'll put on a couple of extra pounds, we'll take you this way, stay in this division, we'll take you this way. It's a pool of sharks there, and yeah, we again we wish Galal the best, recovering from this beating and this loss. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see where he goes. Quick one on the undercard, Jamie. Conor Walker fastly becoming a real cult hero of British boxing. He knocked out Liam Taylor, another guy from Manchester, fights down at the Finest Gym with Steve Aylett. Conor Walker, this turnaround in his career, to say that he's British champion. I remember watching him lose to Kane Gardner at Bolton on a Wasserman show one time, and you kind of thought, where's his career going here? He got an opportunity against Crocker. He lost to Crocker, and then he beat the Matchroom prospect. I'm not sure if I'm putting him in the right order here, but he lost to Crocker and he beat Cyrus Patterson, who was a highly touted Matchroom prospect at the time. And since then, his career's gone up. He's beat Harry Scarf, and now he's knocked out Liam Taylor. It's a real feel good story. He seems like a really good guy, and he's got a good following, and he's really entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I like him. I do like him. If he, and he is a top fella, to be fair. Um, yeah, you did get the order right, by the way. Yeah, he was. Yeah, well, I think you did anyway. You definitely got the last two right anyway. But yeah, um, I think he's exciting to watch. He gets in there, likes to have a tear up. He's got a bit of boxing brains for him as well. Um, I'd like to see him know when to box and when to brawl. Differentiate that a little bit better. But in terms of where does Conor Walker, go from here? Um, I don't really know. I don't know what does he want to do? Does he want to have one more British title fight, win it outright? I think that's probably the best option for him. Does he want to go and try and fight for a world title? I don't quite know if he's going to have, because he did struggle a lot with Crocker. Maybe that could be an avenue. Maybe fight the winner of Crocker Donovan in the rematch. But I don't know. It's interesting because he should really. I think probably have one more British title fight. It'd be not win that outright. I think it'd be nice because he'll always be able to have that belt at home. Always be in his possession. I don't know where do you see him going?
Well, I mentioned, I'm not going to take claim to these fights as, my picks. It's what I've seen in the world of social media for boxing. Originally, one fight that I would have thought would have been made, and this is a pick of mine, would have been Harlem Eubank. Had Harlem Eubank not jumped up levels to take on Jack Catterall, I would have thought Conor Walker and Harlem Eubank would have been a good fight. Just with Harlem coming up to welterweight, winning that British title would have been a logical step for him to take. So I thought Harlem Eubank, Conor Walker would have made a lot of sense. The other names, Pat McCormack, undefeated, ex-Olympian. He's a highly touted matchroom prospect. And then you've got Echo Asuman. I've heard that fight being talked about. And Sam Eggington as well. We all know about Sam. He's took his losses, but boy, again, that's a bloodbath. Sam Eggington against Conor Walker. Imagine
Oh,
those two. It's like
that should be
the
the fight.
robots, isn't it? Rock 'em, sock 'em. But of those three, the fight I'd love to see, because I think both men deserve it, and it would be the most 50-50 out of the three, would be Conor Walker against Echo Asuman. I think Echo coming off that win against Josh Taylor. Maybe he's looking to bigger and better things because he's already had that British title, who knows? But I think that'd be a cracking fight. And Pat McCormack, he's the undefeated prospect. Would Matchroom really cash out Conor Walker at this point, or would they think that he's got a couple of opportunities in him to go up, to better levels, lose, and then maybe come back down? And then I think Sam Jones wants him to go over to Saudi and get him the Saudi bag. So who knows? Do chuck him in with their welterweight if he's gone on the international scene? But for me, Echo Asuman, if he's not going on to bigger and better things, let's see that fight with Conor Walker. So I think that's a terrific fight. I think Conor Walker, Sam Eggington is all action. But respectfully, I think Echo Asuman is ranked higher than Sam Eggington at the minute. So I'd slightly lean towards Echo Asuman. But I think between Echo, Sam, and Pat McCormack, I think there are three fantastic fights to be made when they do eventually happen.
Yeah, good fight. But I think you're right, Pat McCormack. I don't think Matchroom would cash in like you said, because I think that would be a very hard night's work for Walker. Because he's a machine and I'm a big McCormack fan and I look forward to every time that he fights.
It looks
But
like a
yeah,
featherweight, doesn't he, when he gets in the ring?
massive, massive. But he's fast and he's pinpoint with it as well, you know. And for a big guy, he don't go in all guns blazing. He's very tactical in the way that he fights and he picks his shots fantastically. Um, reads it well. But yeah, I think you're right. Probably Echo someone would be the logical option. I think me personally, just I'd love to see the Egerton fight. I think it would be an absolute tear up. It would be a belter, and I think if Matchroom want to keep cashing in on him, I think that's probably the fight to give him. Um, because I don't think he's quite ready to jump up the rankings. And I think Echo, like you said, he's going to move on. He probably want to go a step above now, especially beating Josh Taylor. Does he want to go from beating Josh Taylor to then fighting, no disrespect, Conor Walker for a British title? He'd probably be thinking, no, I want to get in there with fight for the world title myself.
Yeah, speaking of world titles, a couple of fights I want to give a bit of airtime to. One that we was desperately unlucky not to speak about last week, but we was instantly texting each other about in the welterweight division. WBO welterweight world champion, undefeated Brian Norman Jr. with a sensational one-punch knockout. If you've not seen it, he knocks out Sasaki in Japan, in the opponent's backyard, defends his world title, gets out of there. Jamie, what a punch, man. I couldn't get my phone quick enough to text you to say, oh my in God.
I think you text me just as I'd finished watching it myself. I was just like, wow. And it was just the way it was, just the way that like, he moved out the way, this little slip, seeing it, and you could see his eyes, he'd clocked it, he's gone, all right now, I see that chick. Little dip of the shoulder, come round, and he absolutely whipped it. When you're doing boxing training, they talk to you about whipping him in. That was sensational. That was some Indiana Jones whipping that, and it took his head clean off. And
It really was.
sometimes you love to see knockouts like that, but
Yeah.
obviously, to the poor fella that received the knockout, I struggle to say his name. um, you know, that's unfortunate for him, but what a knockout, and that's contender of the year for KO of the year.
Yeah,
What what
absolutely.
what what a knockout, and what a fighter Brian Norman is. To be fair, I don't think he gets a lot of credit for how good he is as an actual fighter and
Let's
boxer.
say, you look at Brian Norman Jr. and he kind of is crept up in the shadows of firstly Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. And when Terence Crawford became undisputed, the belt's fragmented when he went up to 154 pounds to win world titles there. And then in that scurry afterwards, you see Boots Ennis, he picked up a world title. Stanionis, he picked up a world title. Mario Barrios, he won the WBC. And then Brian Norman Jr. at 24 years of age, obviously would have been a couple of years younger when he won the belt, but he's 24 now. We kind of seen the murmurings on social media that he turned down the Boots Ennis fight, that he wanted a set amount of money. Eddie in Matchroom wasn't prepared to pay that. And everyone kind of looked at him with, is he a duck? Is he really, going to avoid the biggest fights? But to go over to Tokyo and produce a win like that at 24 years of age, he could really be the next, big thing coming in American boxing. And we know the 147 pounds division over the years, Floyd Mayweather, Terence, Errol, other superstars of the welterweight division, Sugar Ray Leonard off the top of my head, all these guys that have campaigned at 147 pounds. And you think Brian Norman, could he start getting into the mix? And if he starts looking to unify, if Boots is going up, and he's certainly one to keep an eye on, especially if he's carrying that kind of power. Another big name American that I want to touch on as well, that picked up a big win last weekend, 10 days ago or so, was Richardson Hitchins. He beat George Kambosos to defend the IBF super lightweight world title. And Did you see that fight, Jay?
Yeah, yeah, I did it. Yeah, I did.
Unbelievable performance, unbelievable.
Sensational, sensational, and you know, Cambosis is no mug, no mug by any standards, and he'll get in there with anybody. And he made him look like he was a bit sea level fighter. He made him look like what you should not be in here with me. Like Cambosis is a world champ, is a well an ex undisputed unified world champion. Was he undisputed when he beat? Did he become undisputed when he beat?
Question marks over in it because of the whole WBC franchise situation with the
Yeah,
WBC
yeah,
at that time.
yeah.
So I don't think he was actually WBC champion, but the elevated Loma. Lopez beat Loma. George beat Lopez, and Devin Haney was kind of floating around as a email WBC world champion. So it's a difficult one for me. I class Loma, Lopez, and George is undisputed because they was fighting for belts. It's only
Yeah.
WBC wording that they're never actually going to be considered undisputed, which is severely unfortunate. But I'm there with you with the performance. And one of the things before we touch on George Kambosos with Richardson Hitchins that I was so impressed by was he was dominating on the outside. He'd step in and and exchange punches when he saw fit. And then he put the exclamation mark on the performance with going for the knockout. It was a peach of a body shot.
He
And
were he was sorry, one.
well, did he put him down with a body shot? There was a body shot in there, wasn't it? That really,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, no, I don't think he didn't drop him. He finished him with the body shot, but he hurt him. He kept hurting him with that body shot throughout the fight.
yeah.
Like you said, he dominated on the outside, boxed his head off, and but when it got on the inside, he dominated on the inside as
That
well.
was
And
it. And that was stepping into your opponent's A game. That's what where George would want the fight from to meet him head on, and he beat him at his own game as well. And for me, you have a certain style of fighter. Devin Haney, a lot of people call him gun shy now, and other fighters that don't really go for the kill. They don't really put that exclamation mark on the performance. And in a day and age where we've got Turki Al-Sheikh coming out saying he wants more knockouts, we don't want these fighters running around the ring. Whether you agree with that or disagree with that, Richardson Hitchens took the idea into his own hands and just went in there. He outboxed him. Could have easily seen that over 12 rounds, but he didn't. He went in there and he stopped George Kambosos. So that's really highlighted Richardson Hitchens for me. That he's a great talker. He's one of these brash Americans. Whether you either love him or you hate him, you're going to tune in to watch him. Post fight, he called out Devin Haney. Teofimo Lopez got in the ring, kind of floated around without really doing much. But just a quick word on George Kambosos. He's he's smashed it, hasn't he? You look and you think. I remember him fighting Lee Selby in the IBF lightweight
yeah,
eliminator. I thought, oh, here we go. He'll come over. He looks the part with his tattoos. Lee Selby will box his ears off, and then we're going to see Lee Selby in for a world title. George rips up the script, waits around. The pandemic and everything was going on. Sees Teofimo Lopez upset Vasily Lomachenko, goes in to New York to fight Teo, drops him, beats him, doesn't wait around to get like a couple of homecoming fights, which he would have been well within his rights to do because Teofimo Lopez didn't even have a rematch clause and blah 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 blah. He then fights Devin Haney twice, back to back, sells out two stadiums in Australia. Come on, this guy's nuts. He has a couple of combat fights. He fights Vasily Lomachenko. Now he fights Richardson Hitchins at Madison Square Garden. And you think this guy's got millions upon millions in the bank. His family's set for generations. He's got the honor of being a multi-time world champion, unified world champion. He's fought for belts at multiple weights. He's a proper good feel good story. We keep mentioning feel good, but George Kambosos for me, and I'd love to get him on for an interview one time and talk to him about it. But incredible career, and he's really maximised everything that was offered to him, whether it be with the promoters or his ability, maximised everything. And if he does go and slide off into the sunset, then what a career and what a man.
yeah. Fair play to him. I hope he does now because I think you've been in there with the best of that division now. Fortunately, you've lost to them. I don't want to see you being a gatekeeper to the people that are coming up because you've achieved so much and and the way you did it as well. Because, like you said, I thought Lee Selby was just going to box his head off as well. And had that had happened, Cambosis would never be where he is today. And he took, like you said, turned up, ripped the scripts up, bullied him, beat him, and then did the same to Teofimo Lopez for the first half of the fight. Sold out to arenas, yeah, some story, some boy, and you know what? He's a proper fighter because he didn't have to take them fights, had the Loma and stuff, and like I said, got money from all them fights, but he just likes fighting, and he genuinely thinks doesn't matter, I'm going to win. I'll win this fight, and you can't buy that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, all the best to George Kambosos, whatever he decides to do. Jamie, let's close out by touching on a couple of headlines that have come up this week. Firstly, Terence Crawford and Canelo, it's signed, it's on. We've had the press tour. We've loosely touched on it over the weeks. Not really got round to fully chatting about it, which we will say for closer to September when we kind of preview that super fight. This week with the press conferences, the first one a little bit respectful. The second one, there was a push and a shove. Are we buying into the beef here between Canelo and Crawford, two hugely proud men with two big egos, or are we just trying to sell the fight here, saying that people don't want to see this lovey-dovey respectfulness, that we want to see a bit of bad blood, a bit of needle, and get people talking? What are we making of it all so far?
Definitely trying to move the needle. Definitely trying to move the needle because they do respect each other. The that interview that they had when they're talking about the kids and they find like he's got a seven and he's like, oh my God, and they're laughing and joking. That's how they actually are. There is no beef with them at all. And they're trying to big it up, trying to make a little rivalry there to sell it. But I don't think they need to do that to sell this fight. Bivol Bertabiev did
Perfect
have
example.
none of that.
Perfect
How
example.
everybody tuned in
Yeah,
because this is the fight that everybody wants to see. This is when two of the best come together. You don't need to do big promotional tours, press conferences for a fight like this. There doesn't need to be a fake rivalry. They can let them be themselves. Let them just let them be nice and pally and that, yeah. Because when they get in there, they're 100 the best, and obviously Crawford he's going to want to go and show
yeah.
why he's the man.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll, like I say, we'll leave that there for now. I'm inclined to agree with you that I do think it's just to try and get tongues wagging and people talking about the fight. They are two great fighters in their own right, and the fight sells on that. Although I'm not a fan of seeing them both sitting down and eating with Turkey. I think, yeah, we don't need it to be, all bitchy and Jeremy Kyle-esque, but we don't want to see him sitting down having a meal and, I don't want it that friendly. I want them to be a little bit grouchy with each other. But anyway, let's move on to another potential feel-good story and a journey that's been up. And when it's been up, it's been up. And when it's been down, it's been really down. The mercurial Dave Allen, of course, coming off the controversial loss to Johnny Fisher. He put that right in his mind against Johnny Fisher when he knocked him out spectacularly. We talk about knockouts of the year. That's up there as well when he knocked out Johnny Fisher in 5 rounds in the rematch. And since then, he's been linked with just about everyone, isn't he, Jamie? This is nuts. So he signs with Matchroom. He's been with Matchroom before. We've seen this story play out where he starts beating, his kind of level fighters, and then because he's got a cult following, because he has got ability, it's all in the mind with Dave Allen, I think. And you seen last time when he started getting put in with David Price, then we told if he beats David Price, he could fight Povetkin. If he beats Povetkin, he might fight Anthony Joshua, and that all came crumbling down. And now, he's had these comeback fights on the small hall scene. He got stopped against Fraser Clark. He admitted himself that he'd just give up in that fight. Now he's had these two fights with Johnny Fisher, massive underdog in the first fight, won the second fight, and now he's been linked with Jamie TKV. He's been linked with who else has been linked with Joseph Parker, Deontay Wilder. You know, it's yeah, Joe Parker, Deontay Wilder, Jamie TKV, everyone.
Fraser Clark as well. Fraser Clark
Fraser
rematch,
Clark
yeah.
rematch. He's going to have a homecoming of sorts in Sheffield with him being a Yorkshire boy, and then he's going to be on a superstar show in Saudi. And I just think with Dave Allen, he's a real good guy. He talks very well. He knows his level, but he will be enticed by bigger paydays and more dangerous fights. Where would you rather see him go here, Jamie? I'll put it to you
Yeah.
simply. Would you rather see him JBTKV in Sheffield, small, a generally smaller arena, packet full of his local fans, potentially win the British title, and then make a couple of defenses and then maybe move up the levels, or a Matchroom going to feed him to the wolves and cash him out while the name's hot again and put him in the likes of a Deontay Wilder or Joseph Parker, which, with all due respect to Dave Allen, he's going to be a big underdog in those fights, and you worry that he could take the kind of beating that he took against David Price. But with all due respect, I know he's with Jamie Moore now and he's looking better than ever. Huge underdog in those fights, and those are two avenues that they seem to go down. I'm very much on the side of let's, put the brakes on a little bit. He's made good money. He can make good money fighting for the British title. Then see where we go. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you 100%. I don't. I don't want to see him go down the path of feeding him to the lions again, because obviously he's coming out now about him potentially fighting Parker. That is just a tick over fight for Parker, and it's a tick over fight that's gonna generate a little bit of needle, because Dave Allen is, like you said, he's red hot back at the minute again, and he has got a good following. Everyone will tune in to watch him, but in reality, I love Dave Allen, but I think that would be a terrible fight. Parker, I think he would really get hurt in that fight. And it's not a case of, they might have a bit of it won't be a boxing chess match by any means of the imagination. It would be a bit of a demolition job from Parker. And that's no disrespect to Dave Allen. I just don't want to see that. I think a Jamie TKV, a David Adelaide, at Bramall Lane or something like that, maybe even at the Keep Moat, from because being the Donny Soldier and all that he is.
And of course,
Um,
we want another road trip to Yorkshire after our foray into Barnsley. Get us to
Yeah, big up
Sheffield
them
or
Yorkshire
Doncaster.
fans.
Yeah. But I think on the flip side, we're saying why this is wrong for Dave Allen. I think it's massively wrong for Joe Parker. And this, with all due respect to Dave Allen, he's just beat Johnny Fisher. Would Johnny Fisher have got the Joe Parker fight off the back of beating Dave Allen in that rematch? No, he wouldn't have. For Joseph Parker, he's beat Deontay Wilder, he's beat Zhilei Zhang, he's beat Martin Bakole. Yeah, I think there's more life in a rematch with Martin Bakole, a fully fit Martin Bakole for Joe Parker than he would be fighting
Yeah.
Dave Allen. You know,
I think
you
the
might
idea of
win the
him
world
fighting
title.
Dave Allen. So I think the idea of him fighting Dave Allen is more him just waiting to see what happens with Dubois and Usyk.
What do you think?
And they don't want him to have wait six
Yeah.
months before a fight happens. So it's just, like I said, it's a tick over fight for them to throw him in with Parker.
Yeah, I get that. He does need a run out. I guess it's this whole problem of the belts being undisputed because the other thought for Joe Parker was a trilogy fight with Derek Chisora, and you look and you think, what was he gained from beating Derek Chisora? If he was to beat Derek, and Derek Chisora is in another good run of form, and Joe Parker would start a favourite, but it's a tough fight against Derek Chisora. Derek Chisora is a tough fight for anybody not named Tyson Fury or Alexander Usyk. Um, but when we talk about Jack Catterall, and who was the other fighter that we mentioned where we thought he was just lingering a bit too long and he took a loss? Might have been Josh Taylor as well, where we was talking about fighters that are kind of, and Joe Parker's in that mix now, where you think, if he got in there with an Ajit Kabayel, maybe that's the reason why Dave Allen is a potential opponent, why Derek Chisora is a potential opponent. But I just think at the same time, you can kind of come down levels a bit too far, and then when you're trying to get back up, who knows? I think it's again a problem with having an undisputed world champion where people are treading water. And Joe Parker has been in there with Deontay Wilder, been in there with Zhilei Zhang, been in there with Mark Bakole. He deserves his shot. And had he fought Daniel Dubois in February, he probably wouldn't have had this problem. Like, Joe Parker would be going into undisputed with Usyk, or he would have had his loss to Daniel Dubois, his world title opportunity, and he would have went back to the back of the queue and he would have had the rebuild. So it's just such an awkward position for Joe Parker and for Ajit Kabayel. These guys are beating real operators, real killers, without real, other than financial reward. There's no belt, there's no opportunity forthcoming. But I don't know. Chisora, Dave Allen, I think Joe Parker's a level above that with all due respect. For Dave Allen, go fight Jamie TKV. That David Adelaide, Hergovich left field fight that's come up has really left a vacuum there for a British title opportunity, and Dave Allen is more than ready to take on the likes
On
of James
paper, yeah.
TKV with all due respect.
And it would make money. It would sell. Definitely sell out a stadium in Yorkshire, whether it be Bramall or Barnsley's or Doncaster's. It would sell out, and like he said, I think he deserves a shot at a British title, because don't get what people say. He's helped Matchroom a lot. He's helped them a lot. And he's fought fights he did not have to fight. He shouldn't have been in with at any point in that time.
I seen an old school clip the other day of his fight with Dillian White. I was there in Leeds for that on a Josh Warrington undercard, and him and Dillian was talking, and he was like, "I got 25 grand for that fight." This is what Dave Allen was saying. He's like, "Yeah," and Dill goes, "Well, you was meant to get 20, but I had to put 5 grand in your purse because you weren't taking the fight." And you look back at that and you think, 25 grand, is a
Yeah,
lot of money, but to get in there and
but
fight
it's
Dillian White, would you fight Dillian White for 25 grand?
nah,
You know,
nah. I'm fighting for £25.
yeah. But you know what I mean?
uh,
When you say about helping him out, taking fights like that, when he fought Luis Ortiz, he had no right fighting Luis Ortiz. He's done these, the night shifts, if you like, for Matchroom. So yeah, give him his flowers, let him have his homecoming. And what a moment that'd be. I mean this with no disrespect to Jamie TKV because he's a good operator in his own right and he could very well beat Dave Allen. But if Dave Allen was to go in there and win a British title, what a moment that would be.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd love that. And he deserves it. He deserves a payday where it comes with a title and not because 25 grand was not enough to be in there with Dillian White. And he probably got about 35 or something to fight Luis Ortiz. And again, yeah, it's good money, but when you look at the money it's in boxing, it's actually not.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay, that wraps up everything on my to-do list to chat about. Anything you want to add before we finish?
Do you know what? I don't. When's we're not far off the Manny Pacquiao Barrios fight, are we?
No, that is something we wanted to bring up. And the reason why I wasn't bringing it up, but we could talk about it, is because we're getting into July. And by the time we talk about it now, we'll have our preview. And I was thinking of saving it for that because
Yeah,
we've
yeah,
got a
you're
lot
right.
to
Let's save
say
it for
on Manny
then.
Pacquiao and Mario Barrios. But guys, I appreciate you guys listening and viewing our content as always. We are looking to get the podcast back on Spotify and Apple iTunes, but bear with us for now. It is still just available on YouTube. As always, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a subscribe. We're touching within touching distance of that 1,000 subscriber landmark. It'd be a real honor to get up there. So thanks for all the viewing, all the support. Leave all your comments, your opinions in the comments. Jamie, I'll catch you on next week's episode. Thanks for being with me today.
Thank you very much. See you later.